I'm Eric Anderson. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, San Diego City Council votes on a wastewater treatment plan. It helps the city's water supply and could end a long debate over sewage discharge.
And outrage and fury continue to spread throughout Mexico over 43 missing students presumed to be dead. I'm Peggy Pico with an update on the escalating crisis. Then it's that time of year again, and a security expert explains how to keep your cyber data and identity wrapped up safely through the holidays.
And tonight we begin a two-part report looking at the impact of 20 years of investment in City Heights. What difference have the millions of dollars made for the community? KPBS Evening Edition starts now. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Dwayne Brown is off tonight. Today, the city of San Diego took a significant step toward ensuring its own local water supply. The city council unanimously approved a 20-year plan to turn recycled wastewater into drinking water. KPBS Metro reporter Taryn Mento joins us with the details. Taryn, what does today's decision mean?
It shows the city is moving toward a stable water supply, something that's been highlighted by the current drought. And in the long run, it could save some money. Right now, the city purchases a large portion of its water from outside sources. The program, called Pure Water San Diego, aims to produce nearly 1/3 of the city's water supply.
And how exactly would that all work?
The project is a creative way to avoid costly upgrades to the Point Loma wastewater treatment plant. Right now, the plant doesn't meet basic federal clean water standards, but has been granted multiple waivers over the years. The waivers were intended to be temporary, so the city agreed to a pure water program as part of a long-term solution. When completed, it would divert some water from the Point Loma plant to 3 other facilities for further purification. Ultimately, officials say it would produce 83 million gallons of drinking water a day.
So how much is this recycled water plant expected to cost?
Right now, the estimate is up to $3.5 billion. Some of the money will come from state and federal grants, and the rest will be covered by ratepayers. But construction on the 3 treatment facilities won't begin for some time, so prices could change. There's also some bureaucratic hurdles, so we'll continue following this as it moves forward.
KPBS Metro reporter Taryn Mento. Thanks, Taryn. San Diego and Tijuana officials are agreeing to work together to build stronger cross-border bonds. The mayors of both cities signed a memorandum of understanding, which is designed to forge a closer relationship between the region's 2 largest cities.
There is no question that our cities will benefit from this integration. We will be more productive and efficient, and thereby improve our quality of life to our citizens. We will be an example and national benchmark for our federal and state governments. We'll be the most effective cross-border platform in the world.
Astia Saran says work on the San Isidro port of entry has already removed a major obstacle to cross-border cooperation. Long border crossing wait times appear to be a thing of the past. San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer hopes the new relationship will build successful partnerships.
The synergies between our 2 great cities is so important, and we see it continue to grow. We're creating good quality jobs on both sides of the border. We're a region that competes. We're a region that's doing great things together. We have mutual admiration, friendship, and respect.
Directors and department heads from both cities have agreed to meet twice a year. The first meeting will happen in January. Tomorrow, the University of California's Board of Regents is set to consider a plan to raise tuition. Today, students at UC San Diego staged a protest, a scene repeated at other UC campuses across the state. The proposal would raise tuition by 5% a year for the next 5 years. UC officials say it's needed to offset higher pension and salary costs and to help recruit more in-state students. Governor Jerry Brown opposes the increase, and just ahead of the vote, he's appointed 2 new regents. One of them is former Assembly Speaker John Pettis. Protests over 43 missing students have spread across Mexico to Tijuana. The students were taken nearly 2 months ago and are presumed dead. Peggy Pico takes a closer look at the escalating crisis.
The now former mayor of a southern Mexican city where 43 students were kidnapped in September and presumably killed is facing murder charges in connection with the students' disappearance. My guest, Ev Mead, director of the USD Transborder Institute, joins us with insight into the situation and its political fallout. Ev, welcome to Evening Edition.
Thanks, Peggy.
Now, more than 22,000 people have gone missing in Mexico since about 2006, according to the government there. How is this student abduction different, or is it?
Well, I hope that it serves as a gateway for us to look at these other cases, because if we add the homicides, we were talking 60, some estimates as high as 120,000 people. It's different because it was a lot of students, but it's also different because of the response of civil society, because people have mobilized around it, paid attention, and demanded justice in a way that we haven't really seen so far.
Now, these protests, I understand, are escalating with some violence, some burning of the city buildings in the city where the abduction took place. But there seems to be a disconnect. Why would drug lords or a drug cartel go after students at a poor teaching college? Yeah,
well, I think both of those points are really important. So the first is I would really hesitate to say that the protests are violent. I mean, there's been some property damage, but when we're talking about an armed conflict that's claimed thousands of lives and where people have been savagely tortured and murdered and put on the internet and beheaded and all this kind of stuff, burning some cars and building, I mean, it doesn't quite raise to the level of violence for me. As far as the second part of the question, in terms of talking about what's going on in Guerrero, why these kids would be targeted, it's a great question, and I think it's an indicator that the nature of the violence in the drug war has changed. It used to be that most of the violence was contract enforcement. It was kind of like gangsters during Prohibition in the United States. Now what we see are organized criminals who are actually conquering local municipalities and using the apparatus of the local government, local police, local officials, in order to enrich themselves, to extract resources.
And this is something that, can you relate it back to what happened with these students and the allegations with the mayor of that city?
Sure. So if we look at what these kids are doing, first of all, they came to the city on their way to Mexico City for a national protest, and they were protesting an education reform. It was a national policy. It didn't even have much to do with local politics. They also made some complaints about the local mayor and the local government being corrupt, but it was essentially a basic civil and political protest. And we have to ask ourselves, then why would a drug cartel care very much about this? Well, they cared about this because they were working at the behest of these local officials who want to control the place with an iron fist. In other words, the rationale here was political, not so much about protecting the drug trade or any kind of illicit business.
Is there a history of this in Guerrero?
Absolutely. Guerrero has a long history of government corruption. There are associated massacres of protesters and dissident movements going all the way back to 1962. The governor of the state, Ángel Aguirre, who just basically resigned in shame or out of shame, was forced out of office. He was involved in two separate massacres in the 1990s. Guerrero has a sort of clannish politics. It's local families and landowners who, some of whom were involved in the drug trade, others just involved in a garden variety corrupt politics going all the way back to the middle of the 20th century.
Now, Mexico's president just got back from a free trade mission in China. During his first 2 years in office, there's been a slight decline in I think some of the violence going on related to the drug lords. But he's focused a lot on Mexico's economy.
Yeah.
Do you think this current outrage and this uprising, so to speak, will have an impact on him? Do you think that he will address crime and corruption?
I mean, I really hope so. And because I think that people, even people who probably didn't vote for him and didn't support him, they hoped that he was sort of right. Even people who didn't like him. The idea that the homicide rate was going down a little bit, that we were talking more about jobs and the economy in Mexico, that even some of the people who disagreed with particular reforms, like the reform of the oil sector, they hoped secretly that he might be right, that there might be a new future. But then when we see this sort of savage attack on these students and his tone-deaf response, takes a trip to China that's basically a publicity tour, doesn't offer much in the way of a federal response, and people are very suspicious of the response that did come, of maybe a forced confession, maybe some lies. So So what basically people see here is a lot of artifice. They see a president who's trying to make this go away, but people don't just want this to go away. They want him now to address the substance, and I think people are kind of all in now. They feel like this isn't violence that's just about the drug trade. This is violence that could touch anybody.
Anybody across because it is throughout Mexico, as you have said. Any idea on how long these protests might last, and do you think it will lead to something like this, spring uprising?
It really depends. The closest analog we have in Mexico would probably be the violent suppression of student protesters in 1968. And I think the similarity is the demands that the protesters were making were very small. They were kind of about student issues, student relations with the police. But then it was police repression that turned that into a catalyst for a larger social movement. That could happen here. But I still think we're pretty much early days. I still think people are waiting to see what's going to happen. There's certainly some of the elements of something larger here. I mean, we see the presence of social media. We see students and young people who have a much greater set of expectations for basic democracy than they would have probably a generation before. And we see real, honest-to-goodness frustration and also sympathy with these students from people who are from very different social sectors.
All right, Evmeda, thank you for this update. And I know you'll keep us posted on this. Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much for having me, Peggy.
A temporary detention center for immigrant families may close by the end of the year. The facility is in Artesia, New Mexico. It opened last June because of a surge of Central American families caught crossing the border illegally. But the center hasn't received any new immigrants in nearly 2 weeks. Many of the families have either been released to await hearings or transferred to centers in other states. A new report says more people entering the country illegally are heading to the East Coast. The Pew Research Center says New Jersey, Florida, and Pennsylvania all saw gains in illegal immigration from 2009 to 2012. California is one of 14 states that saw a decline. State investigators say 2 of California's largest health insurers misled customers about the doctors they covered. Companies are Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield of California. The state's Department of Managed Health Care says the companies gave customers inaccurate lists of doctors that were covered in plans sold through Covered California. Investigators say that customers found out their doctors were out of network after an appointment, and that cost them more money. Anthem and Blue Shield say the state's survey was flawed. California nurses rallied at the state capitol today, calling on the nation to follow the state's lead to increase protections for nurses treating Ebola patients. New hospital guidelines were announced on Friday, requiring protective gear and comprehensive training. The mandates come days after 18,000 nurses held strikes to draw attention to the need for increased safety. Hospitals who don't comply will face civil penalties. Californians owe more than $10 billion in court-ordered fines and restitution, including parking tickets. State officials say the collection process is plagued by inconsistent reporting, and counties have little incentive to collect the money because the debt goes back to the state. The state legislative analyst says the best way for the state to get the money is to put the state courts in charge of all the collections. Analysts say centralizing it will give staff more time to work on finding ways to help people pay their fines. City Heights could be called San Diego's richest poor neighborhood. Since 2002, foundations alone have invested more than $250 million in the neighborhood. That's about what the city of Chula Vista spends on all of its residents each year. Now, in a 2-part series, Speak City Heights reporter Megan Burks asks what's come of all that money and whether residents are better off because of it.
City Heights is wedged between Interstate 805, State Route 94, and busy El Cajon Boulevard. In the 1990s, Caltrans dug out an 8-lane trench and ran Interstate 15 right through the middle of the neighborhood. For residents there, it was a colossal smack in the face. They'd already seen the last remnants of 1930s and 40s suburbia razed and crammed with shoddy apartment blocks, no room for parks or libraries. Crime had gotten so bad, the community's own business association papered billboards with a plea. Welcome to City Heights, crime capital of San Diego. Won't anybody help?
When we started the office building across the street, the opening day when we started construction, The superintendent called me and said there's a guy who just got shot and he's dead on the corner here. It was a pretty wild place.
Jack McRory was city manager at the time and became the architect of the city's intervention there. He meets me in what was ground zero. Back then, the scene of gang murders and crack deals, the City Heights urban village now anchors a police station, park and rec center, library, and affordable housing. The city pulled it off with significant help from the late Saul Price. The founder of Price Club, which was bought by Costco, infused millions into the project, and his family's investment in the community hasn't let up. The foundation estimates it's spent $200 million there since 2000, about half on transforming the diverse neighborhood with bricks and mortar. Full disclosure, Price Philanthropies also helps fund KPBS. Saul Price's son, Robert.
We're in this for the long haul. This community is an amazing community. It's a community of immigrants. And I think this country was founded on the basis that immigrants from other lands who needed opportunity could come here and make a life for themselves. I think there's always going to be a need for that. And so my hope is that we, as our foundations, will be here to maintain this community as a place where people who are arriving from other countries who need the opportunity can settle in this community and have the resources and the opportunities that's going to be good for them and their children.
So has Price created that place? Nearly every academic and community organizer you talk to in City Heights admits the needle hasn't really moved on any statistical gauge. The community still performs worse than the county average when you look at income, employment, obesity rates, educational outcomes, crime, you name it. Any trends showing improvement tend to follow national trends.
So everyone wants to talk about impact, and if they're not making impact in like 5 minutes, you must not be doing it right.
Laura Dietrich heads a University of San Diego think tank on nonprofits and philanthropy.
But, if you think back to the beginning of a big company like eBay or Amazon, and you look at how long it took them to even break even, investors didn't blink an eye. We think that's normal. I think sometimes we have to be very realistic about what we're trying to achieve and how long that's going to take.
Dietrich, Price, they both point out that reversing generations of disinvestment is going to take, generations. Right now, the best they can do is measure the qualitative wins. So they can do things like what I did, stop a random passerby on the street and ask him how he feels about things. Philemon Cortez is walking through the urban village that Price helped build to pick up his son from middle school.
When I was little, when little kids were thinking about other things, robbing, doing this or doing that, they kind of don't think that way around here now. I can see the influence that my son is getting. There's good people around here now.
Cortez credits the change of pace to all those Price buildings, even though he has no idea who the Price family is. For good measure, I ask the same question on the other side of the neighborhood, across Interstate 15.
They're like the heavy hitters. When you have a specific list of causes, and it's kind of the bucket list of things that need to be done in real time to make this livable, they're the ones that get brought out to do the big task, the Caterpillar Earth Mover task type things.
But I ask Schott something people like Dietrich ask when they're trying to measure an intervention's success. What happens if Price leaves?
That's a very good question. Who would step up? I don't know.
Tomorrow, we'll take a look at how that strategy in City Heights has changed to get at that question. Megan Burks, KPBS News.
This series produced in part by KPBS video journalist Katie Shulov with contributions from KPBS videographer Christopher Maui and videographer Brian Myers of the Media Arts Center. The recent credit card breach at Home Depot and last year's epic data breach at Target are reminders to shop safely, especially online. Peggy Pico has the latest ways to keep your cyber data wrapped up during the holidays.
By now, we're used to hearing about internet scams and stolen credit, bank, and identity information. And just like other thieves, cyber criminals take advantage of shoppers during the holidays. My guest, Lance Larson, with the Management Information Systems Department and Homeland Security Program at San Diego State University, joins us with how you can protect yourself these holidays. And welcome to Evening Edition, Lance.
Thank you, Peggy.
Now, What are some of the key phishing scams that are out there right now, either on the internet or through texting?
So I think it's important to talk about what phishing is. So some of consumers and your watchers, they might get an email from a bank that they've never done business with, or they might get an email from the California DMV or the IRS, but it's not a real email. And what it's trying to get you to do is click on a link so that you can actually go to a website and be tricked into putting in your personal information where hackers can use it to be able to take out credit in your name. And so we're seeing a lot of the same types of phishing we've seen in the past, where it's just trying to get you to click on a link and in any form that it tries to do it.
So if you get something like that, and I'm thinking particularly on text, because sometimes you don't remember who's texting you, what do you do?
So I think it's always important to be a little bit hesitant and not be all trusting. And so what I tell my students in the classroom in college is I tell them, think 3 times and click just once.
So really try to figure out if you know where this text is coming from before, or this email is coming from. Are there additional risk for shopping or using iPads or apps online? I mean, on your smartphone?
So I think it's important with our mobile devices to know what apps we're downloading. And sometimes when we download an app, that screen that comes up and tells you what permissions the app has on your phone, some of us just bypass it. And I think it's really important to read and understand what you're giving the app permission to do on your phone or your other mobile device. And so I think it's really necessary for consumers to be able to understand what they download before they even visit websites.
And Cyber Monday is coming up, the Monday after Thanksgiving. It's one of the biggest online shopping days of the year. How can you tell if you're going to a website maybe you wouldn't go to normally because you wouldn't buy these gifts for yourself? How can you tell if that website is legitimate?
So I think the first thing you can do is before you click that link, you can hover over with your mouse and usually see where that link's going to end up. And if you're hesitant, or if you have that feeling deep down inside that tells you that there might be something wrong, don't go shopping there. There are plenty of other merchants to be able to go and buy something from. Even in the real world, some people don't necessarily trust online shopping. And if you don't trust online shopping, it's okay. We have malls and other physical locations that might give us a better sense of security.
Now, when it comes for paying for something, a lot of ATM cards or debit cards are also MasterCards. Are those safe to use? Or I shouldn't just say MasterCards, they're credit cards linked to your ATM or your debit card. Are those safe to use, or is it better to use a straight credit card?
So I think it's important for your viewers to know the difference between a credit card and a debit card. A credit card is a little bit easier if there's any fraud that occurs to be able to get that right off your statement. But with a debit card, sometimes the debit card is linked to a savings account or a checking account, and it may take your bank months or at least weeks to be able to get your money back in your account. And for those of us that are doing our online shopping, can you imagine not having that money there to be able to buy the gifts that we need to?
Let's talk about these bargain shoppers. Let's say somebody wants to go to Craigslist, just for example, and buy some discount tickets. What's the danger there?
So again, it comes back to trust and understanding who you're getting and buying an item like a ticket or a venue, getting into a venue from Craigslist. Really understanding who you're buying from. And if you don't know that person, be very, very hesitant. And I've even heard scams where they fake a driver's license and they create tickets themselves, and so it looks legitimate, but people try to enter that concert or that music hall, and they get denied entry because it's a fraudulent ticket.
And just to recap, the top 3 ways you would want to protect your money and your personal information during this holiday season.
So I think first is to be a little bit hesitant and not always trust everyone or everything. Think twice, click once, and also put yourself in the shoes of someone who's coming up and asking you personal questions, what they might be trying to get out of you. If they're knocking at your door, they're sending you a piece of mail, they're giving you a call, do you really need to give them the personal information? They might already have it or should have it, and that should be a red flag to all of us.
All right, I want to let folks know that we have a lot more anti-scam tips on our website, and we also have these different ways that you can protect yourself at kpbs.org. Lance Larson, thanks so much.
Thank you, Peggy. Thanks for having us.
I'm Judy Woodruff on the next News Hour. How the U.S. government is trying to take down the Islamic State by targeting their money. That's Tuesday on the PBS NewsHour.
An exciting win for the San Diego State men's basketball team today at Viejas Arena. The number 16 Aztecs beat number 25 Utah. Final score 53-49. A lot of the action came in the final 47 seconds of the game when the teams combined for 18 of the total points scored. Our red flag warning is over, and now we've got a chance of showers in the forecast. It's a slight chance on Thursday. Look for cloudy skies along the coast and temperatures cooling down later in the week. Low 70s for the inland valleys tomorrow, dropping to the mid-60s by Friday. Going to be a chance of showers up in the mountains, too. Daytime temperatures there in the 50s for the rest of the week. Lows 40s at night. And no rain expected out in the desert, but there will be some clouds, and desert temperatures will be a moderate 70s. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks very much for joining us. Have yourself a great evening.